After this brief break to change the panel, we're back in this meeting on the relationships between the European Union and the CELAC in the face of the current challenges. There is no doubt that one of the main challenges that we have nowadays is the struggle against climate change. There are mechanisms and that terminology that we are using of the green transition, we're using it very much, how to reform the economic development system to make it truly sustainable. We also need to change our sustainable development policies. We have three main experts in this field who will touch upon this topic, and I will give them the floor as they appear in the program. Each of them has 10 minutes, and then we will have about 25 minutes for debate. So I will give the floor first to Mónica Corrales Rodrigáñez, who's I'm sure it's not the first time that people get confused with your last name. He's a spokesperson and advisor in the Department of the Cooperation Fund for Water and Sanitation of the Spanish Agency for International Cooperation. Thanks so much for being here, and you have the floor. Thank you very much, Miguel. It is a great honor to be here. The topic of green transition and the struggle against climate change and for sustainable development is one of the main pillars of cooperation between the European Union and Latin America and the Caribbean. I will start with the conclusions. I think the role of a development cooperation is fundamental in this topic. I have been working in this field for over 30 years, and I will give you a positive perspective. A lot has been done on a conceptual level, but also on a practical level from a bottom top to the top. And I work in the Water and Sanitation Fund, so I must emphasize that this is a strategic element for cooperation. From a bottom-up perspective, sorry, I will share with you a brief presentation with key ideas. So we are at a very important point of equity and climate emergency. Some people say that there's not enough information, but there's more than enough information that is accessible to everyone. I gave some very few clear examples. These are the planet limits. The University of Stockholm did a great job in 2009. It's true, and it may seem like a contradiction, but out of these 9 limits that we need to respect for the planet to be a safe place for people, we have overcome 9 of these limits. Sorry, 6 of these 9. We have 6 of these 9 limits that we have overcome, but we know what we have to respect. For example, respecting fresh water and green water use, land system change. We have all of those limits, and those limits that we haven't overcome yet, there are good news about them. For example, in the case of ozone, thanks to the Montreal Convention, the Montreal Protocol, we went from having a crisis. It's a 1989 protocol. CFS were forbidden, and right now we are at a safe point. From another perspective, let's see if I can change my slide. Here we have a report that I read every year, Climate and Environmental Emergency, the WFF report. It gives us an idea of where we are at. The wildlife has decreased in 73%, the Amazon is decreasing. In 2024, we get some limits. You know that there is the carbon capture. These are red lines. We have the situation of corals and pests. Another key report is the climate change panel. It's very exhaustive. Over 40% of the world population live in highly vulnerable areas to climate change. And much more money needs to be spent in this field. Adaptation and mitigation, $16 billion were spent in this field, but the gap is larger and it needs to be bridged. The private sector is necessary, but official development aid is going in the right direction, a very important topic. Let's see if I can show this to you. Here we have equity and climate change. This is the inequalities report of 2022. 10% of the richest people in the world emit 50%, account for 50% of the total emissions. We have a responsibility, what we eat, how much we eat, what we wear. And each of us can change this. And we are all responsible uh, in a common but differentiated way, as a climate change and then the certification reports say. Very briefly, what was the international response? I started working um, as a worker, aid international aid worker. We have a fund here that includes um, the different UN agencies, and at that time we each had our own agendas. We had the development people, the World Bank provided the funds, and the we had the environmental fund of the United Nations. This has changed. If you go visit the website of any of our agencies, we all have the same narrative. Since 1972, big progress has been made. We had the environmental world on one hand, the Millennium Development Goals. Next year, we will have a conference in Isabel. What's a systemic change that happened after 2015? We need to do everything everywhere. That triple transition, environmental, economic, and social, needs to happen at the same time, simultaneously. And it's possible because we have information that we didn't have before, and we have possibilities that we didn't have before. For example, when I started working in this field, we talked about renewable energies as if these were like a dream. Since 2009 to 2019, the cost of solar energy has decreased in 90%. And those are things that are happening in our days. I remember when we started working this, we talked about the growth limits, nothing is possible. The reality is creating new possibilities. For example, in 2023, renewable energies, thanks among other things to uh, solar energies that are being developed by China, Brazil, the US, because the US is not just Trump. There's a great machinery there. So we are changing the energy mix. There are other topics, for example, like transitions, energy transition. Nowadays, what a car mm, consumes is much lower. And then we have electrical cars, fisheries. I have had the opportunity of working in the sector of fisheries, and large progress has been made. We have new technologies, and um, there is an impressive global awareness. There are some reports that tell us that almost 80% of the population of 125 countries wants their states to do more in terms of fighting climate change. This agenda is shared by the statement of the European Union and CELAC in 2023. But my experience in all negotiations of climate change and biodiversity in the last 30 years tells me that there is a community and we have been helping each other. I'm trying to change my slide. I just have 2 minutes left. I would like to briefly mention the commitment of development aid. Thank you very much. The COP16 just took place in Cali, and although not much progress has been made in financing, there's a very important topic, which is working differently, being at peace with nature because we are part of nature. Very briefly, the commitment of Spanish cooperation. We are part of the Europe of Team Europe in the climate change COP. The new emblematic projects of the global gateway is being presented, Petén. We can comment the situation of Petén, but the European cooperation focuses on sustainable development with a cross-cutting perspective. We have an access that is cooperation for sustainable development and global solidarity. We have 5 years for this transformation. We don't have 25, and we chose four priorities. One is water and sanitation, which is fundamental, together with climate financing. As part of these instruments, I want to focus on water and sanitation. I think it's a space for cooperation that is fundamental in the context of the cooperation between the EU and CELAC, because we all know that water is the heart of development, and it's a heart that is a little bit sick. We still have 2.2 billion people without access to safe drinking water. Much worse in the case of sanitation, with all its implications for health. Also, there's a clear link between water and climate change. Unfortunately, what we have seen and what we have suffered a few weeks ago in Valencia should make us alert. The ambassador was telling us that it didn't just affect Valencia, Honduras has also been affected. We need to make progress, although much progress has been made. To give an example, in the 70s, in the last century, over 300,000 people died as a result of a typhoon, and this can't happen nowadays. The Spanish Corporation is focusing on water and sanitation, and there's a political and economic and resource effort that is being made to uh, promote this water and sanitation fund. I don't have the time to give more details, but I'm really happy to share these strategic objectives based on human rights. Um, the idea is to guarantee access, um, putting an emphasis on governance, and to give the private sector the opportunity to bridge this gap, focusing on the integral resource of hydric resources and fostering resilience and adaptation. It's fundamental to work with strategic partners. And I want to wrap up with a sentence that I really like. In 2007, we were visited by Jane Goodall in Spain on the Day of Biodiversity. As you know, she's an expert in apes, and she was telling us everything that she has done throughout her life. And she got a question, Jane, what can we do to change the situation in the planet? And she said, it's very easy. We just have to appeal to two things, brain and heart. And I think that's what we should be doing. Thank you very much, Monica. There are so many things to say, and it's a shame that we don't have enough time. I want to emphasize one of your sentences. We must do everything everywhere. And that brings a question to mind. What can we do when someone doesn't want to do anything, as it is the case of some countries? Let's move to the next presentation. Isabel Belloso Bueso. Now she's going to speak to us as the director of the um, Extremadura Development Agency and in representation of the government of Extremadura. Please, the floor is yours. Thank you very much. I would like to emphasize the role of the regional level and the role of the decentralized cooperation and developmental aid. I want to share how we are addressing this problem here in Extremadura. we are strengthening the relations between the European Union and Latin America and Caribbean countries based on this tool, uh, developmental aid. Okay, so decentralized cooperation, as we refer to regional and autonomic and local cooperation, plays a major role when it comes to um, reaching the territory. You were talking about bottom-up approach. So we use our funding and our project development capacity. Through that, civil society entities can get to cooperate in this construction and in this endeavor to challenge to face our challenges. The 2023 summit recognizes this role, and the different events that were part of the roadmap also bear witness of this importance. To face the challenges that we have in terms of climate change, inequalities, and food security, um, local developmental aid is very important. We want to reinforce solidarity connections, but we must be aware, and I really like to talk about the return of developmental aid. As Miguel Angel was saying, it's a two-way road, and we include this in our cooperation as a two-way journey, because we have the opportunity to um, to leverage our own development. In Extremadura, our cooperation policy is part of the general cooperation plans. We just adopted the last cooperation plan for 2024-2028. We adopted it a little bit before the national plan was adopted. This helps us to prioritize and have strategic priorities for Latin America and the Caribbean as a priority region. The presence of um, cooperation from Extremadura is dates from back in the day. We have different priorities set by the national cooperation plans. In our plan, we focused on reaching an alignment with the European cooperation and its priorities and strategies like the neighboring instrument, the international cooperation plan, and the global gateway that has already been mentioned. All these instruments acknowledge the strategic role of decentralized cooperation. This year, in 2024, in practice, we selected different projects in order to turn all these ideas into realities. The regional government is committed to addressing inequalities and building more integrated and sustainable societies. We passed 16 or 17 projects that account for over 3 million euro of investment in countries and projects to be developed in Latin America and the Caribbean. We firmly believe that this may help us place Extremadura as a bridge between the European Union and Latin America and Caribbean countries. For the regional government of Extremadura, this is a priority. Our interventions happen in countries like Bolivia, Peru, Bolivia, Ecuador, Cuba, and some projects also have an impact in different countries because we also support networks. So countries as Salvador, Nicaragua, Paraguay, Mexico, Brazil, Argentina, or Dominican Republic or Chile are also areas where we are having an impact. All these projects are not carried out directly by the agency. We work through organizations that are headquartered in Extremadura and that have connections and agreements with partner organizations in these countries where we do our work with. And there are other local, regional authorities that are involved. For projects to be sustainable, they have to be supported by local sustainable in terms of time and economy. So we need these counterparts. Here we have another example of how the regional level is of paramount importance to um, turn cooperation into reality in other territories. In our strategic cooperation plan, we identified 4 strategic environments and we have 5 years to develop them. One of them is the sustainable development model focused on people. The second one focuses on inequalities, that is how we can make an emphasis on intersectionality of gender and how we address the fight against multiple inequalities. Human mobility and migrations is another strategic field, interventions to support migrant people and people who are in situations of mobility. We have created a new, uh, more cross-cutting area, which is to develop um, knowledge, development, and talent. And this is something that we want to introduce in international development. We support projects that promote talent, that promote science, and create capacity. More specifically, in this year, 2024, we have focused on different strategic areas like rural development and agriculture, with projects in Bolivia and in Peru, in the field of food security, economic empowerment, rights of women and girls, inclusive education, and technical training, innovation, and development of productive chains in sectors such as quinoa, palta, inclusion and rights of vulnerable groups, or health, research and technology in health. We're also supporting projects in this field. In the field of digitalization, renewable energies, and jobs, we're working on the protection of rights in the digital world and job opportunities for people with disabilities. In a digital world, promoting digital services and digital um, entrepreneurship projects. We have also selected some projects to get to know the impact of cooperation projects. This is something that Pablo was mentioning when he was talking about the importance of getting to know the impact of what we do to be accountable. And this is something very important. These projects reflect the commitment of the regional government of Extremadura with a decentralized cooperation that does not only respond to local needs, but that it strengthens uh, shared values between Europe and Latin America and the Caribbean, and promoting inclusivity and equality in the whole region. Some of these are aligning their approach with the purpose of achieving green transition, uh, biodiversity, and climate justice. Um, some of the priorities of the EU CELAC partnership. We also are committed with multilateralism through cooperation, because we are cooperating with different UN agencies to have people there that are um, tr um, that are working as interns. And through this, we have worked with UN Women, UN AIDS in Peru, etc.
And last but not least, we are also trying to articulate with the European Union in our relationships from the point of view cooperation. And That's why we are members of the Pan-European Network Panforma, articulating voices, articulating voices of local and regional governments around these goals, looking for our participation and the local and regional participation on different funds, such as the Global Gateway. We are also seeing that that lack of, I wouldn't say information, but sometimes when there's no information, actually, you're asked to create your own information, so to say, in order to participate of those tools. I think that we think from the local and regional cooperation, we believe that there is a lot to gain from that Global Gateway tool. Thank you very much. That was all on my part. Thank you very much, Isabel, for telling us about the importance of this job for these green transition challenges through cooperation. I think that is essential, not just from a politics point of view, but also from the human point of view. That brings people closer to each other. Society as a whole and the different organizations work with the civil society and the citizens on the territories. And the question that I have for you in this case is you're doing this from Extremadura, but the rest of regions also have their own uh, aid and cooperation agencies, and most of them are looking towards Latin America, if we speak about Spain, right? So what is the interaction that there might be with other regions or municipalities in Spain, outside of Spain, and their aid agencies, their cooperation agencies, because they probably know less about Latin America, right? So have you articulated yourselves or organized yourselves in a way in order to do that? I see that the next speaker is already online there waiting for us. It's Luis Planas Herrera from the General Directorate of the Environment from the European Commission. You had very many commitments yesterday, which prevented you from traveling, but you're with us online here. Hopefully, you've been able to follow the previous interventions. You have about 10 minutes, and then we'll have about 20 more minutes for the debate. Thank you very much, says Luis. You have a little bit of echo, do you? If I can see the room, because I'm looking at myself here. It was a pleasure to have the national perspective and the regional perspective. And I'd like to speak now a little bit from the European Commission and the European in general as such perspective. Thank you to the Yuste Foundation, the Ministry of Foreign Affairs, and the government of Extremadura to put this theme on the table. This agenda is very important because it's an opportunity for positive and constructive cooperation. My colleagues said it already, and this comes at a very complex moment internationally when we need to reinforce our relationships with Latin America. I think that the ministerial summit on the environment and climate change, I think that Isabel made a reference to sent a clear message. A clear message regarding the areas where we want to invest together. And there is a great commitment on the part of the European Union in order to continue to invest. We should have a Team Europe approach for aid development, cooperation for development in Latin America. We have a green investment approach, ensuring a complementarity of action between the European Union and the different country members. And we also have specific programs such as Alinvest Green or Optima Plus, or some other specific programs related to some other aspects of the environment. I also wanted to underline that from the DG Environment, I see three key areas for the cooperation with Latin America, or actually with CELAC. The first one would be the biodiversity and nature area. I think it was Monica who mentioned the recent Cali summit, the biodiversity summit, the COP or the COP16. I think it's very important to work around the threefold crisis: nature crisis, biodiversity crisis, and pollution crisis. Together with working together also around challenges for social cohesion and economic development, we will be able to solve this problem. As for biodiversity, we have the Global Biodiversity Framework, is the Kunming-Montreal Agreement and the Paris Agreement for Nature, with the European Union and CELAC cooperated in a very active way under the Chinese presidency. And the Cali summit has been a great milestone in order to implement it. The Colombian president has been a great president for this COP16, and several important decisions have been taken, for example, including the indigenous peoples and the local communities in the decision making having to do with nature and biodiversity. We make sure that after the Cali summit, there will be a formal platform in the for participating in the decision-making processes. Then there is the Cali Fund. That's a historical decision regarding the benefits of accessing genetic resources. A fund has been created so that the beneficiaries of human resources of biodiversity that will be able to get some type of molecule in Brazil, from Brazil, that can be used by the pharma industry or the cosmetics industry. They should contribute to a fund that could revert benefits to the communities and populations where that genetic resource was generated in the first place. There are very many challenges ahead because we need to develop a strong implementation network. For Baco, implementation is also one of the most complex aspects. The European Union, together with the member states, we want to go beyond the development aid. It's not just about development projects. We have to mobilize the private sector. We have to mobilize new tools and make sure that other donors or other investors could do their part. As the European Union, we've committed to multiply by 2 our aid to biodiversity, and we're doing it with the help of the member states. There's also another complex topic here, we had a dialogue today about the reforestation procedures and rules. You probably heard about those rules in the press because that's generated a lot of debate. But that those rules also put us in a relationship with the countries of the CELAC region. For example, we're developing a traceability procedure with Argentina regarding the traceability of products. And we're also in conversations with Brazil to establish a task force, a joint task force, in order to be able to apply that regulation, in order to put up to the ministerial level between Brazil and the UA around these matters. We see that several countries in the region are already taking measures that are quite ambitious regarding the struggle against deforestation. We see that some countries are reducing their deforestation levels, which is quite positive, but we must continue to support producers, in particular small holders, small producers, in order to make sure that they can benefit from the greater transparency of the value chains and of the new opportunities. So first area, that's biodiversity. Second area I wanted to mention was circular economy and plastics. That's yet another very important area where we have developed a project at the regional level. For example, we have the FPI, the foreign policy instrument of the European Union in Latin America in order to reduce plastic pollution. There's a great interest in countries from the region to share best practices. In Europe, we've been transitioning for about a decade now towards a circular economy through eco-design and new recycling policies. That's very important for the investment part. The cooperation with the European Investment Bank has been quite important. And this tool will play a very important role. In Busan, their negotiations starting this week that will play a great role against plastic pollution, and Ecuador is being a key partner there. And last but not least, I'd like to mention water. Monica referred to it previously. Cooperation around water is paramount. The global water crisis is worsening. We've seen that in Europe as well, with the recent happenings. And if there is not an improved collaboration at the regional and bi-regional level, we will not be able to improve. We had a summit last year in New York. There is a new momentum given to collaboration around water. We're developing new platforms in order to invest on regional governance in order to avoid possible conflicts around water in the future. The experiences that we've had around the Danube, maybe we could export them in order to generate common governances. How to improve reuse of water be an opportunity for European businesses and technologies. This is going to be a very active year regarding water. A few weeks from now, we'll travel to Riyadh. That's going to be at the desertification COP, whereby we try to increase the knowledge and the political priorities regarding desertification. And then some more meetings will come, such as a new UN summit on water in 2026, presided over by Senegal and United Arab Emirates. Once again, there'll be an opportunity for improving collaboration and cooperation regarding this field. I think I'll stay here. I've opened up very many new elements. I only wish to underline that these are ongoing initiatives. We're trying to identify the areas because it's important that we be concrete regarding action. The fields are very large, the challenges are very large, so it's important that we advance in a concrete shape. Today's debate is important because we are also transitioning, so we have to redefine priorities in our international cooperation with CELAC and to make sure that for the next term of the European Union, this will be also fundamental. Thank you. Thank you very much, Luis. We are well aware that 10 minutes is not enough, but there is so many issues on the table that we had to organize it somehow. But I think that all three speakers have gotten to the essence of the of your topic. So it's been your case. You've perfectly illustrated us about the deforestation, the global framework or the frameworks for biodiversity. You've given great importance to the management of water, amongst other things. I remember that as part of one of the gatherings that we organized with members of the Yuste Academia and awardees of the Carlos V award, one of them said that the future wars will be around water. It's 5 years from now. You still have 5 years for maneuvering. For hopefully we won't get to that, but we know there are already conflicts around water. There's something fundamental also in our struggle against climate change. It's very important to struggle against that new movement opposing that need to fight against climate change, right? So maybe you have comments on that. See Christian Gimmers and the ambassador of Honduras, maybe. Please, Christian. Yes, thank you, Miguel. Following Monica's last words, brain and heart, in order to underline three things. First, that comes from a woman. And I've been trying to understand for 40 years why something so irreversible and vital to humanity, why we haven't been doing anything significant. There are very many projects and very interesting, and we know that, but why so far there is no effectiveness in actions and implementations? I'm not going to develop my vision here, but there is neuroscience there as well, telling us about things. The human brain comes from an animal, the Stertun chemist, and I am convinced that the greatest speakers for negating climate change are all male, and that's quite significant. I've talked to many neurologists, and there is something around there somehow. And I think humanity is still half animals. The brain cortex has not taken, and the heart also has not taken the weight either. That comes even more from the feminine side because, male individuals also have a feminine side. But when things go bad and when the risks go up, when they are worse, etc., this animal, this striatum, takes the floor, and the results we see it with Trump and other crazy people who are leading us. But anyway, another comment. You were speaking about the successful struggle against the loss of the ozone layer. That was one of the very few successful examples of international cooperation. But there, the male individuals were very much impacted because that greatly impacted them in the present is not the case for climate change yet. And some people told me, why should I? And some people have told me in the States, why should I worry about the next generation? This generation has not done anything for me. That comes from the Trump side, right? And it's today generation who is going to live there. You know, Miguel, when I said that Miguel is going to have to pay for the electricity bill, you know, it's not a joke. We don't have very many years left. You were speaking about 5 years time. I agree with you. If we don't take any radical measures, such as increasing radically the price of fossil fuels and taking measures against meat, meat-based food, because the methane emission is 50 times more serious than the CO2, right? So there is a gender dimension, there is a monetary dimension. We've also spoken about that. And we also need brains and heart. Some brains to analyze where the barriers are. I'd say it's the monetary one, is the brain one, and the gender one, and then democracy functions that way, right? Is the famous paradox of the horizon. A democracy is incapable of looking ahead to the future. They only see short term. I'm not saying that I'm not fostering benevolent dictators, right? I'm in favor of democracy, but democracies are incapable of thinking 20 years ahead. Please, Ambassador, Mr. Ambassador. Yes, thank you. Very briefly, in the name of CELAC, I'd like to thank the European Union and the European Commission for having actually postponed the implementation of the regulation against deforestation for SMEs and for larger companies. And I will I want to reflect about that, and I would like to respectfully ask the cooperating agencies that, together with our own agencies, we try to orient the export associations in the respective countries to be ready in a year, because larger businesses were ready, but smaller businesses, we only have about a year and a half in order for them to be ready. So thank you very much. Thank you very much, Ambassador. Speakers, panelists can answer to the questions. Monica, please. First, I really liked the reflection by Christian. I wanted to share with you something that really caught my attention. You know, Coleman, he spoke about emotional intelligence, and he wrote a specific book about ecological intelligence. If climate change is so imminent, why we are not doing anything? You were speaking about the reptilian brains and you know, them focusing on survival, right? But there are the indigenous peoples who are much more connected to nature, who are capable for having this, for activating a different part of the cortex. I'm not an expert in this. They know that something's going to happen, and they actually protect themselves before that event happens, right? I wanted to say that there is a lack of tie, there's a lack of bond between us human beings and nature. It's and I agree with that masculine way of acting. It doesn't mean that only men do it. It's a defense mechanism, right? But right now there are no mammoths any longer. We have to work collectively with some collective intelligence, and we don't know how to do it, right? Whatever is not working, you said it before, let's leave it. And if we don't know how to do it, well, let's recognize that we don't and let's learn it. And I also agree with what you're saying that we should start working bottom up. India and China came with a concrete project to the meetings. They said, we don't have water here. We didn't have water here. Now we have water. So yes, that was a lesson from us, I think, and we have to make progress in that respect. And also, we must acknowledge that we are human beings, we're part of nature, and we have the capacity to have a vision for the future. And let's recognize that we don't know how to do some things. As far as negationism goes, we've always had that. I remember that when there was the Kyoto Protocol, even though there was a United States administrator that was favorable for that, the Congress didn't approve it. And despite the fact that Al Gore got the Nobel Prize, they couldn't go on with it. We are a democratic society, and we must be based on arguments and evidences. And now I think we have a privileged situation for our capacity for being informed. I think that we must make people understand that there are only positive things stemming from protecting the environment, respecting the environment. I think that's a good message, yes, because sensitization, awareness building is fundamental in this respect. Many times, those who, as they say, the bad people, the evil people never sleep, right? So deniers never sleep as well. I have fear here as an emotion as well. I think that the uh, uh, volume, the size of the problem is such that many times we, as individual citizens, we say, I'll just park that. I'll just leave that aside. I think that giving a space to the emotions is painfully needed because not everything is rational. And you also asked me how we coordinated. I don't know if I should speak about as a decentralized cooperation. We're 17 autonomous regions here in Spain. Almost all of us have activities in international cooperation for development. We have an inter-territorial commission, which has transformed itself into an intersectional commission, and that's for the Spanish space. It's a sort of ecosystem that enables us to build relationships amongst each other and to build together and to have similar horizons and perspectives. We do have specialized areas. The different autonomies have areas of specializations. It's not so much geographical specializations, but sector specialization. And we do have this sort of bottom-up perspective or approach. We are within the framework of the Council of Regions and Municipalities at the European at the European level. And that has a lot to do with the foreign policy of every country. International cooperation doesn't go their way, never goes their way. And also, for some countries, such as Belgium or Germany, they are totally decentralized, so they're doing their own things. Well, some people don't know how cooperation goes, so this is good explanations for that.
Simplemente lo mío es aporte, nada más que ponerlo encima de la mesa para contrastar. Y evidentemente.
I just want to make a contribution as a contrast. We have talked about the environment here, but I would also want to give value and disseminate the idea that guarantees and the efficiency of in terms of rights is also very important. For example, in the next panel, I am going to talk about the Ibero-American Judicial Summit 2014, the 17th edition. The environmental agency was created. There's a clear awareness there. It's composed of 10 members. Most of them are magistrates from the Supreme Court. It's selected every 2 years. And there is a high awareness in terms of the efficiency of rights, environmental rights, and the progress of different measures on the judicial level. Judicial decisions are always after the fact, but those are the ones that create changes and dialogues with lawmakers. So we have established on a Latin American level, we have created environmental capacity trainings because there is also a trend for the specialization of judicial bodies because it depends on the workload. And there is an environmental justice portal. We're talking about cooperation, and we're talking about a very regular and ongoing work focused on awareness raising and the training of the judicial elements. And there's a clear need to raise awareness of all the topics that have been raised here. Thank you very much, Magistrate. It is fundamental for the judiciary to take care of these elements. There's a new element that we have been hearing for a number of years, which is AECID, which introduces the potential responsibility, legal responsibility in the event of environmental crimes. Luis, we're going to give you the floor for you to wrap up this morning's panel before we break for lunch. Thanks very much. I'm going to be very brief. I just want to thank Christian for his reflection. I share it with him. What Juan was just saying is very important, and I want to emphasize the importance of the Escazú agreement. The Escazú agreement is fundamental for ensuring the public participation in environmental decisions, and it's also fundamental in terms of accessing justice in everything that concerns the environment. This clearly shows the willingness and the commitment that CELAC countries have. I want to thank the ambassador of Honduras, his words on the deforestation regulations and the proposal by the Commission to postpone the implementation 12 months. Many efforts have been made, and I want to thank the work of of productive countries. They're making a great effort to transform their value chains. And I take note of the words from the ambassador about supporting small product producers and small producers and exporters. As for um, people who deny climate change, I think pedagogy is much necessary. Sometimes it's a challenge to educate people on this. It is also very important, and we are seeing that there's a need to keep working on shared responsibility. All stakeholders on an international level, whether private or public, must take active part in these discussions and particularly in the implementation of solutions. And in this regard, explanations are important, but listening processes are even more important. I think we don't listen enough, and to fight against these denial attitudes, we need to understand where they come from. But it's not only people who hold denial positions. There are other different positions. In Cali, I took place in the Maloca. We had discussions with indigenous populations, and it was very rewarding because each territory, each person has a different perception of the value of nature, how it's used. Traditions are very important, and traditions are very different. Inside Europe, we have very different traditions. If we compare the north from the south, if we talk to someone from Sweden, their perception of forests differs very much from the ones we have in Mediterranean countries. If we visit other parts of the world, for example, in the countries in the Amazons, the perception, the values, and all the elements that are connected to nature are different, and we must understand them in our policies and in our cooperation. I just want to emphasize that we have to remain optimist. I said that as a commission officer, we must remain optimist. There's a lot to do. We don't always do things right. We don't always achieve our goals, but we must keep reflecting and acting jointly to address these major challenges for the future of everyone. Thank you very much. Thank you very much, Luis. Let's wrap up this panel. Please send me an email with the elements that you want us to include in our report before the meeting in Brussels on the 6th. So you have some homework. Thanks for all the panelists. Thanks to all the people who made questions. And let's break for lunch.